Hello, everybody. Last time my phone got overheated and I took the phone in and they gave me a new one, and this happened in 5 minutes. So let's try it inside. I hope it's not the phone overheating and it was outside, but we're going to get Chloe back because, oh my gosh, thank you for your patience. Isn't it? I've just invited her to join, but can't wait to do a show and tell on this guy. It's a pretty one. I'm excited. You see how yellow this albino is? So we're waiting on Chloe, Planted in Provo, to come for part 2 because we got cut off because of my technology. So nice to see everybody. While we're waiting, let's definitely drop where you're from. Where are you growing from? And are you an indoor or outdoor grower? Do let us know. We're waiting on Chloe. There we go. I'm coming from Salt Lake City, but I'll talk about that in a minute. I've got some cool show and tells. I'll give y'all a preview while we're waiting. See, this is a behead project I did, so I'm excited to show you which ones are variegated or not. So I have some really cool ones. And I've got this really cool cubic frost that we're going to see. I've got this incredible black swan, one of my very favorites. So I just want to give Chloe a second to get on because we had a cutoff because of me. Okay.
And we're back.
Okay. Sorry, guys. This happened to me last week, and I got a new phone, and it's doing it again. Because it didn't even give me a warning, so it's some sort of glitch for sure. But I'm going to do it inside so I don't make the problem worse. So that's why my background's not as cool. But we back, guys. We back. So I just want to start completely over with introductions and everything because, oh my, I don't know where we even cut off. But it looks like more people are joining. That's great. Thanks, guys. As y'all are hopping on, let's drop where you're growing. Where do your plants live? Where do your babies? Where are you growing your babies? Where are you growing them up?
You have it down below. We're going to talk about variegation today in tropicals and desertous plants. So let us know any questions you have down below.
Yes, this is definitely a time to Q&A. You've got definitely a tropical plant expert here. I've got all my tropical plants inside because they would literally, they couldn't survive Utah outside. So anyways, but yeah, let's see where you're from. As far as I'm Cam Davenport. I'm in the Salt Lake City, Utah area. I live right outside the mouth of one of the Cottonwood Canyons here. So I have crazy growing conditions. I grow plants inside and out, but I have a big greenhouse, which is crazy to grow in a mountain season where you get snow in the high desert for the summer and it's super hot. I love plants. I've been collecting them for a long time. And as a little girl, I always had a garden or something. And it's just I just think they're miraculous. Every time I start seeds, even a tomato plant, I'm like, plants. So that's how deep in it I am. And I met Chloe, who's planted in Provo. She came to the greenhouse one day and it was really awesome. Tell us where you're coming from and a little bit about yourself.
So hello, friends. I'm Chloe. I've been collecting tropical houseplants since 2018 about. So it's been 4 years now, which is crazy. I started actually with cacti and succulents from Home Depot. It's a gateway drug to plants. And then I started going into more desertous plants, mostly tropicals. I have a couple cacti now, most that Cam graciously gifted me, and they're still kicking it. So I think I've done a pretty good job. And I mostly now grow Hoya, Monstera, Anthurium, and Philodendron. Are most of what I grow here all indoors, so I would love to start a greenhouse outside or something, especially if my husband decides maybe he does not want a whole entire room for the plant. But we'll see when we get there. But I think your greenhouse is so cool. I loved seeing it when I did, and I'm super interested to learn more about how variegation presents itself in cacti and succulents because that's something I don't know very much about at all.
It'll be a good day. So let's dive right into it, talking about, because I know everybody just wants to really get to show and tell, let's be honest. Like they're like, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah, 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 show and tell, you know? So we'll just get to the good stuff though. But variegation is something really important to learn. It's like, because variegated plants are very expensive. And so when you're going to invest, you
yeah.
want to get the best. And so, because plants are an investment, fight me if you will. So tell us as far as indoor plants, the tropical plants, what is variegation?
So variegation, especially when it comes to tropical plants, is a mutation in the cells that distribute chlorophyll or that house chlorophyll. So the green parts of the plant will lack that gene that allows them to have chlorophyll and photosynthesize and all that. And because of that, we get beautiful yellows, mints, white, and that just depends on the level of variegation that you have in that. But it can be caused, as we were talking about a little earlier, by a genetic mutation in the seed or in the stem, or due to like a sickness or something that, whether it's viral or not, that makes the plant really sick or just presents a beautiful pattern on the leaves. It's hard to really get to the bottom of it, but that's like the most simple definition, is a mutation, a genetic mutation in the plant that causes a lack of chlorophyll in the leaves.
Basically weirdos. They're mutants. They're weirdos. And that's what, and what's cool about that is, since it is unpredictable, it's so different. It really does look like a painting. I love, like, especially albos and monsteras, like all the Thai constellations, all those, every time it comes out, you literally think it's a new Van Gogh painting. And same thing with succulents. It's just, you don't know. It's so exciting for us plant lovers. Like, shh, my plant's growing a new leaf.
Yeah, and no two leaves are the same, which is something I think is really interesting, especially when it comes down to what causes variegation. Are there ways to influence variegation, which is an argument I have, or a debate, a healthy debate that I have very often, especially when it comes to people that maybe have strong opinions but don't know that much for themselves. And anything I say, I always recommend people look it up themselves. Like, don't just trust me. Like, even though I think I know what I'm talking about, like, don't just take what anyone says 100%, because we just have our own experiences. And though I may feel like I know a lot, don't take my word for it.
No, it's really important to learn, especially because variegated plants are so expensive. I mean, albos, you're lucky to find one for 200. That's the cheapest. And you're talking all the way up to thousands of dollars. Same thing with different succulents. Most variegated succulents are 50 plus bucks for a small one. So it's always good to do your research. Take these ideas, go look at Google. There's incredible articles and bloggers, and your area is really different because we grow in the high desert. And if you grow in humidity, everything's just really different. So we're sharing our experience. And we want to, and one of the things, like as far as cactus and succulents, it's kind of the same. Variegation is a mutation, but you do see things like there's succulents like the Pearl von Nunberg and Echeveria, cubic frost. It kind of just generally look more purple or pink. That's just, they have less chlorophyll and a different type of hormone that's grown, but that might not be, that's just the colors. But so they can be pink, and that's not, even though since it's not chlorophyll, it's not variegated, it's considered still a mutation, because like plants are green. And so when things mutate and get different colors that are not originals, but then and what I really like, variegation can show up in stripes, absence of color, more color, circles, dots, lines. It's really cool, streaks. And that's what's really awesome. And succulents, you can't, here's an example of like from the stem. A lot of times when you see an albo, for example, a monstera albo, you'll see today the stem is variegated. And so that means it's like a truly variegated plant. But in succulents, you can kind of see, well, this came from look how variegated this is, a head chop. And so I chopped it probably last year, and I've been pulling babies off left and right but yeah, so this is a mutation, and you can't really tell as much. Succulents are more leaf-based. If you pulled all the leaves off and you looked at the stem underneath, you could see maybe some variegation, but a lot of times it's just the leaf that you see, each one. So those are pretty, but there's not like sport variegation. We'll go into different types in just a second, but succulents are different because it's just it's not the stem, it's just how are the leaves looking, and there's different levels of variegation. But recently I've been hearing a lot of terms like sport variegation. What is that in tropical plants?
So in tropical plants, a sport is the term is thrown around quite a bit. So if we want to get to the true, like a true definition versus like the common definition of a sport, common definition of a sport is any plant that you find that is not originally from a variegated plant. So like if you go to Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever big box store you have near you, and you're looking through the sea of regular monstera or regular banana plants, you know, all this, and you find a plant that has a variegated leaf and variegation in the stem coming from a pot of just regular monstera, that is what's popularly termed a sport. It's just any variegated plant you find that you did not purchase as a variegated plant. So there's different kinds of sports as well. So you have a seed sport, which refers to the mutation happened in the seed. So like the first leaf that popped out from the seed was variegated. And then you have a sport which happens from a point in the stem that either got damaged or the mutation happened as it was growing. So you have regular leaf, variegated leaf, variegated leaf, variegated leaf. And so those are the two different, you know, normally kinds of sports that you find regularly among plants. How I like to term the sport, like a sport, is a type of variegation that hasn't been determined yet. So if you find a plant that has white variegation, even if it's in a Home Depot or a Lowe's, it's not from a plant you bought as variegated. I think that to me would be I would call it like an elbow sport or something. Instead of just saying it's a sport. Cause like, oh goodness, what's the plant I have? So this green on green plant back here, I'll take it a little in. This is one that I bought as an Aurea sport. Like the nursery owner has a billion monstera, and he found a couple that looked really interesting and set them aside. But because this variegation hasn't been botanically named yet, it's not kind of up to you to name it. So
what'd you name it?
Times I like to name it a lime surprise, because the leaves come out looking totally normal green, and then as they harden, they get just this beautiful green color. Especially like in this leaf, you can see it really nicely. Just gets very bright and limey. But obviously, I'm not a plant seller, so like a real plant seller. I sell on the side, and so I just kind of call it that for funsies and to keep track of the genetics from this plant. But because this hasn't been determined yet, I would just consider it, you know, a large form sport. But it does get kind of dicey. But basically, yeah, a sport is a plant you find that's variegated, and it didn't come as a cutting from another plant, or it wasn't like a Thai constellation that is genetically modified to have variegation in a lab. Which is exciting because you can find it with other plants. Alocasia have become really popular because they have been able to, like, someone found a sport variegated one, because no one had ever found a variegated alocasia, and then, well, I won't say that definitively. I had not seen anyone have variegated alocasia for a long time, and now they're super popular and really sought after because who has variegated alocasia? They just kind of are. Monstera, though, have definitely come in the spotlight for being sport variegated, and I think I've seen Tyler Thrasher find a couple.
I love his page.
It's so cool to see because he does both tropicals and succulents, much like you. And he has a couple of variegated ones too. Or like his sports have just been from like finding like a mutation in his succulents where it's like, oh, this one was not supposed to be variegated, but now it is. And I took a leaf from it and it's also variegated, and which is just so cool to see.
It is. It's really fun. I really recommend his page, Tyler Thrasher Art, because he does a lot of fun things with plants and creatures, and I have a great time watching his page. And he does talk about the variegation, because that kind of goes up. We're going to talk about pruning a little later, but it kind of slides right into the thing. If you go to a store or if you buy a plant that's variegated, and I just bought a variegated pothos, and some of the leaves that started popping up were green. So I cut them because I didn't want them to overpower the plant. And it's not something you really have to do in succulents, but I do know pruning because if you do have, whether you buy it's rare when you buy a fully variegated elbow that you're going to probably get a green leaf. But like what Tyler Thrasher does on his page is like trying to prune for variegation and have that. Will you talk a little bit about pruning and variegated and things like how to maintain a variegated houseplant?
Yes. So most variegated houseplants have a tendency to revert. The only, like specifically monstera, because that's what I specialize in. Um, Almost every form, even of stable variegation. When you hear stable variegation, generally, that just means that the plant will continue to produce the same type of variegation. So even if it reverts, it's still considered stable because it's white, 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 maybe a green leaf, but any leaf it produces will always have that white variegation. Versus a Thai constellation is like the most the most direct form of stabilization because it will never revert. The leaves will always have a similar type of variegation. It will have that creamy color always, and it's because it's been genetically modified to be that way, which we love, but I kind of also love the thrill of possibly having to maintain this plant. So what I have had to do also, whether you have too much variegation or too little variegation, the only thing you can externally do to influence that variegation is to propagate at the stem, because that's where the genetic mutation is housed. It's in that stem. So giving it more light, giving it less light, changing the temperature of the rim, all the other external things you can do have not been proven to influence the level of variegation that you will see in the following leaves. Of course, it'll make your plant grow better or worse. It'll make it look more beautiful or more, like ugly. Like if I was to put this plant in a dark room, it would get really small leaves and turn into almost like a pothos looking plant because I'm not providing the growing conditions that it needs. And green plants will always grow better than variegated plants. That's why you do not see them in the wild, because green plants will choke the life out of variegated plants. They are not as healthy and vigorous as plants that have all of the potential to properly photosynthesize and take in nutrients. Like that's just, it is what it is. And so we can grow them beautifully inside or outside if you have the conditions. But in the wild, they stand no chance. So what I've had to do to either promote better balanced variegation in my plants is to cut it back to a better balanced node and let it grow and see how it grows. The beautiful thing though with variegation in plants is that it changes so much as the stem grows. You'll see more white in sections and less, like more green in other sections, and it all depends on where the leaf comes out. So I've had plants where it's been split down the middle, white, green. And as the plant grows, if the stem twists at all, well, guess what? I'm either having all white green leaves or all green leaves. Exactly. So like this is a wonderful example where every single leaf is so different. But I bet if you look at that stem, you'd see, okay, the place where the leaf came out is like super variegated. Yeah, so like that next leaf is probably going to be really nicely variegated.
This one you could tell even coming out, this one's going to be really white, which is kind of what you're talking about. Like sometimes overly variegated, if you have too much white, that means the plant does not have enough places to get chlorophyll. So it's going to eventually just grow slow or not do well. Also, sometimes if it's too white or too variegated in a tropical plant, we'll talk about that in a second. She's basically like, hey, sometimes you have to prune it because it's just too much, or maybe it's too little. Maybe a leaf popped out there like, I don't want that green of a leaf. I'm going to try again. Because you can just see the difference. I'm hoping I can get the stem like you're talking about. See how bicolored this is? It kind of starts green. This is a variegated node. This one is the original one. Very green, but very beautiful. But then what has popped out of it, look at the different colors, green into white. And so you can see.
And you can see the change reflected in the leaves as well. And I always recommend to people who are considering cutting their plant back to promote different variegation. Hello, Sarah. Thank you for joining. I always recommend waiting at least 3 or 4 undesirable leaves. So whether it's too variegated for your liking or too green for your liking, wait a handful of leaves because you never know if that stem changed. But after 3 or 4 leaves, you kind of get a good idea and can cut back.
Yeah, because you never know what might happen. Like that's the cool thing. It's an art project, really. So But it is really important because I've had that happen. I bought a pothos cutting, forget what kind, it was a variegated kind, popped in and I like didn't pay attention to it. And every leaf that came out after was not variegated. So it really does happen. You kind of have to watch variegation because sometimes the green does overpower it. And so I had to cut it back and I still, for some reason, it will not variegate out. It just like, was like, you know what, I gave up. So it's because I didn't maintain it. I let it go. I should have started cutting it right away. And I was like, so.
Yes.
But stable versus unstable is a good topic. Like, for example, in succulents, it's really important to think about the stable versus unstable. For example, lip hops. Those are those butt rocks, and they split and a new one comes out. And so I have yet to buy it. I mean, I love variegated. I have almost every plant you can think of. But I won't buy a lip hop because once that thing stilts, it's shown you might spend $400 on this variegated lip hop, but the baby is just really over and over shown to it's not stable variegation. So while the outside is really cool, there's no way to propagate it. It was just almost like some mutation just for that. So you can get it and enjoy it. And most likely when it splits, the babies won't have it. So that's very unstable. And then oftentimes, like when you're at a grocery store or Home Depot or something, and you see a variegated, kind of a sport variegated, where you'll see more like a white leaf, just or a stripe of the white coming off, and it's not all over.
Yes, like usually
opposed to,
or a spot of white. Usually that doesn't turn into anything.
No, you have to, and the nice thing is you only pay like $4 for that succulent at Home Depot, so I highly recommend it's worth it. Because I've found albino things. It is totally worth going to all those big box stores and taking a peep and finding something. Because basically sport variegation, when you take a ton of cuttings of something or a ton of seeds of something or a ton of propagation, statistics and science just show that a percentage are going to either crest, die, variegate. And so the people that are these big box stores they're just like wrapping them up and shipping it on. So I have found some of the coolest things. I have found variegated tiger jaws, which are like crazy at Home Depot. Like I never give up a chance to go into Home Depot and peep all the, because you'll find some like, is that a variegated tiger jaw? Mine. And so because thousands are being shipped out. So highly recommend all those big box stores, nurseries, because you can find some cool things and kind of make your own. That's, kind of name your own one. So, but yeah. Sorry, what'd you say?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you. It is super, super cool. A big example I can think of the stability versus unstable variegation. So in order to like get nomenclature for a plant, so how we have the Monstera deliciosa albo, Monstera deliciosa aurea, Monstera deliciosa Thai constellation, all those names are because the plant has proven to show continued variegation with propagation over time. The variegation has all stayed the same, and that is what makes it a stable plant. So it can revert, but the plant, you can cut it and cut it and cut it, and it will always produce the same variegation. However, a plant that has not, so it cannot be considered a registered cultivar, is the Tyler Thrasher sport. His Monstera, every time he cuts it, it's different. Usually it is like a minty color, but it'll go white, it'll go yellow, it'll go so many different colors. And so he's been unable to register it as a registered cultivar because, well, it won't stay the same. It produces so many different plants. So like this is the leaf I currently have on a plant I was able to get from him. And so you can see isn't she pretty? Real, because I don't think I've shown this plant maybe once. But you can see it's hardened up so beautifully, and it's got some of that like mottled, striated. It's got sectoral parts, but it's like a minty. It's got different colors of green in it. When this first came out, it looked very like white, very minty, and it's hardened down to be nice, like tri-colored almost, I'd say. But if you look at his group photos of all his Monstera, they all look so different. Or it took forever for one of my other friends who has the Monstera oceana to register his as a registered cultivar because he had to prove it wasn't a virus. He had to prove that it could propagate and that the propagated plants would also carry on the same genetic mutation. And it was a really interesting process to watch. Of course, it is now a registered cultivar, but it took years of him getting different tests, applying, showing pictures to make it a registered cultivar that's different than an albo or a mint, things that have already been registered. which I think are super cool. Like if I ever wanted to register this as a cultivar, I could try to.
No,
But that's
it's a lot of fun. The more you can get so deep and nerdy in the plant world. I love it. Like, I mean, it's not just, I mean, you can have them just sitting in your house and enjoy them. That's great. But like, that's something cool because you can mix your plants too. Like one of the experiments I want to do with variegated plants is pollinate two highly variegated different like echeverias or something like that and see what happens, because it's, you know, who knows, because succulents are a lot different. So I have one here. This is Echeveria Chrissy and Ryan, and the mother isn't super variegated, but you can see it. Like we've got a albino. This guy's nice and variegated, but you know, and then we've got two right here that are insanely variegated, and then a non-variegated one. And so, and then they're on the stem. Oh my God, it's growing the cutest little variegated baby right there. Two variegated babies. And so the stem, if you look at it, is brown. So you couldn't look at it and be like, that's going to be variegated. But
chunky.
yeah, it's just, you'd have to really take all the leaves off because that's this to be able to see if the stem is variegated. But oftentimes I'll show you on one of mine, it's not really, but, and the best way to prop these is to pull a variegated plant. Like if you pull, you're not going to, albinos are kind of their own thing. You can, if I cut this off, it's not going to grow on its own. There's no chlorophyll. So you really, I just like to enjoy the plant together. I rarely crop out. I won't crop this guy because I don't care if like it gets 1,000 of these non-variegated ones. And then as you see, like in the wild, you do see that variegated plants and variegated cactus do exist more in the wild because there's the one and then all the other ones don't affect it. It doesn't revert it back because it's itself. And so maybe it has its, so succulents actually look really cool, mixed, variegated, and non. Like here's a really cool specimen. This is the black swan. It's one of my very favorites. So you've got a really big albino. Like I can't cut that and I can't leaf prop it. So I just enjoy it right there. But the leaves around it, like, and you could see on the other side, nothing. This is just a whatever plant, but the leaves close to it, see that variegated stripe? It's got some variegated stripe, and I'm having a hard time. I can't even get these to prop. I pulled a few and I won't do any more. I'm just letting it do its thing. But so these have those stripes, but then the whole rest of the plant's just normal. And so I'm just going to enjoy it because over time, this is just going to shoot out different babies. And there's a good solid, because neither of these stems are variegated or white, but then it shot out an albino. And there's a good chance if I cut that off, that it would revert back just to normal and this plant wouldn't have an albino. This was just something like, just like being an albino person, it was just kind of a gene thing that popped out. Yeah. So what's up?
We'll continue to send nutrients over to that side. So I also really I like leaving some green leaves on my plants because I'm like, well, they are going to help supply nutrients to the leaves that are not able to properly supply themselves nutrients. Janae, hello.
Hey. No, it is true. You have to think about variegated plants. You have to think about those things because they do grow so much slower. Like Thai constellations are like, don't even, they make me so mad, but I love them so much. Like one leaf a year. I mean, it's not that bad, but you know, might as well be. But
yeah.
Yeah. And then like, they're just little princesses. But then albos, you have a couple leaves a month, but a normal monstera, you might get like 10. And it's just because they don't have the chlorophyll. Because really, if out of anything, variegated plants are plants that have spotches that are lack of chlorophyll, so they can't grow. And so keeping them connected to mother plants almost like, so this one, I won't cut off this because this will die and never grow. It won't even be able to root. It can't get the nutrients. There's no chlorophyll. But altogether, over time, I look forward to in 10 years, that this thing will just get crazy and you never know what it can be. Like here's another one that I think is super cool. It's Echeveria cubic frost, which is a favorite variegated. It's one of the coolest variegated. I pulled it right from the pot because I didn't want to take the leaves off. But so you can see here as a cluster, you've got just one. This is the mama, and then it shot off. Like actually, the funny thing is it got either grew some. Echeverias don't grow straight up in nature. They grow kind of like crazy. So either this one was like kind of going crazy or somebody laid it on its side. But so you can see here the pink that's coming out, the pinky purple, it is a mutation in general because plants are normally green, but this plant has very stable purple variegation. But you can see mixed in here, you've got the albinos, you've got an albino mixed with like that would leaf prop, but very slowly. This whole stem, like look how pink and white that stem is.
Yes.
And then it's got variegated plants. So here is just kind of what like if you let things go, succulents, you never know what's going to happen. And so if I cut all those off right here and just took this clump off, or I cut this head off and gave you this head, the babies that propped out of that very well could not be variegated. The babies might never be variegated that come off of this. So it's just letting it kind of grow into a cluster and letting it be. And just, I love just showing what, and then it supplies, this helps grow more variegated because it has all that, it's able to take the energy.
Right.
What's some show and tell from you? Let's see some tropical show and tell, because I've got three other plants of my show and tell.
Perfect. Okay. To respond, oops, dropped you. To respond to one of the comments, Layla, send me pictures in my DMs and I will try to help you out with that. I have accidentally applied neem oil too, and then too much light, and it just totally like browns the leaf. So send me pictures on DMs and I'll try to help you. But for my show and tell, the thing I think is most interesting with variegation is not only how many kinds there are, but the different patterns and how the leaves change as they grow. So like with this monstera, for example, you can see that the lower leaves don't really have that much variegation, right? Like I started with having very little, still super cute, and as it grew, it got way higher variegated leaves. We got some floral leaves with some more like chunks of variegation, and some more mottled leaves where it's just like different stripes and patterns in the leaves. And I have since cut it as well. This is all growth in the last year and a half probably, and I cut it just right down here, and it still grew like very similar leaves to before, but it's all just so nicely variegated. And I love the differences. I used to have, oh my goodness, I used to have a half moon variegated, which is like the variegation is only on half the stem, so the leaves come out half variegated and half green on each side, and then it turned ever so slightly, and then it just produced all green leaves. So I was like, I'm over it. But I also, another type of variegated monstera I have is the Aurea. So this one gets really nice yellow leaves. Very different. So you can see how like bright this yellow is on this half compared to different sections of it that are more like a yellowy green. So it's a plant I love a ton. This new leaf has gotten a lot of light too, so it's a little bleached. But I've heard some people think that variegated plants look sickly, and some of them do, I will grant it. But this yellow is so different from a yellowing dying leaf. I cannot relate. And then this
I'll show a yellowing dying leaf. My mint, the air conditioning vent got opened by it and it dried it out. So my very valuable mint, I'll show you what yellowing looks like, and it's not as pretty. Don't judge me. Was not like that.
Yeah, we'll compare.
Yeah, compare that. Like it dried out too fast because I didn't know the vent was opened. And so it just dried out too fast. So like yellowing like this happens either, it's funny because it's either means it's overwatering or underwatering. You never can tell. Like it's just, but it's giving you a sign that it's not happy. This is not good. This is not variegation. You want hers. But yeah, so the yellowing is not that. But check this mint. Mint is very hard to find. And so I love this one because mint is as they get a little older, they get lighter, and this gets even more mintier here.
Yes,
but this
full mint leaves. I love the green on green or the minty plants because they are so much more like healthy than ones that completely lack chlorophyll in all layers of the leaf. So I love it.
It's like green, all the shades. Like the mint is just different shades of green. Like, we've got the Aura, which is more kind of yellowy and green, and then Albo's white and green, and then you've got Ties, which are kind of cream and green. You've got to have them all.
Exactly. And speaking of Ties, so then we got the Tie Constellation Cream. This one I've been growing for like 3 years, and it's still like so tiny. I got its first ever fenestrated leaf, finally. But it's so interesting because it just, it grows so different. All the leaves have that like tie, the constellation pattern. It's just like a burst of variegation that doesn't like always stress. Be a sport at a Home Depot and it just has like one splotch. Let's say it's just got a splotch over here and nothing else on the leaf. I usually leave those behind. But if it has a section where it like a stripe comes from the mid stem and stripes out, I will take that. I mean, take it because they're like $10 anyway, so it's like might as well try. But
Exactly.
a better sign that like, hey, it's going to continue, because it's coming from that mid stem, which usually also means there might be something in the petiole. And in the stem, where you were showing that candy cane striping, you also have that here on this tie where you can see that those different levels of variegation in that stem, which I love. That alba over there is definitely my biggest. We've got these ones. I need to trim this leaf a little, looks like, but you can see it's got a new leaf coming right there.
Mm-hmm.
So exciting. And those are definitely my coolest monstera. Of course, I have a couple other albos too. Nothing as impressive as my oldest, tallest monstera right there.
It is so impressive. It's really starting to look like the ones in magazines, like everybody's dream, because that's a really good one to get, guys, if you want more of a fast growing one, if you like want results and things. So albos, I have found, they kind of pump out. Like ties, forget it. I love them because I love stars, but and I have to have every one because that's how I am. But so let me show you this succulent one. This is a beheading. So the plant ended up being unhappy, and so I beheaded it like last year. And so here's the last leaf it has. This is the last of the original leaf, and the rest are all babies that have cut off of it. And so you can see, yeah, like the main head that came out of it was beheaded. I mean, variegated. And then this baby's variegated. This one is not. This one has one leaf, and it was the original. Let's see, you probably can't. Succulent leaves also pop off. So. But yeah, you can kind of see the little white popping out there. Just that one. And then the outside baby, no variegation. And then the one outside just kind of light. So you can just see in this plant just how it was a really nicely variegated plant, just how the babies are propping different. Like I've got 3 or 4 excellent babies. And what I'll do is I pluck them off. I'll just take this whole stem off, you know, and that will be a cutting. And then you don't know. And so what's cool about taking cuttings, I have another little teeny, I don't know, this little pink dot right there is another baby. But propping succulents is quite easy for it's better to do it this way, behead or with a leaf prop. Get a succulent that's already really variegated and behead it. You can plant the head that you just beheaded, and then it just starts popping off babies. But this is one, like a really good example of what succulents do, is just, you just never know what pops out. And it's very common not to get a stable variegation, but kind of a family of variegation.
Right. It's like, keep trying. Do you treat your variegated succulents any different from your regulars? I don't treat mine very different, besides giving them more light, because they will not do as well in lower light conditions, as they need that extra light to have a better chance at using their chlorophyll more efficiently. So I just give a little bit more light than I would maybe my regular monstera. But other than that, I treat them very similarly as far as watering, like humidity, fertilization, all of that. Do you do anything different with your succulents?
The only watering, fertilization is all the same, but you do have to think about temperatures because they are more delicate. They don't have the ability to protect themselves against the hot or cold as much as another plant. Like think of it like if you're an albino person, you're not going to want full sun. So I do recommend like afternoon shade if you're going to grow outside. You know, morning sun's wonderful, but if you can get either filtered light in the afternoon, like I like to put my succulents sometimes like under a shade cloth. Those are awesome. You can get them on Amazon. We're just that extreme, especially because, you know, when people tell me full sun and I'm in the desert here in Utah, I'm like, that's nothing. Not even tomatoes can handle full sun here. So I like to put a shade cloth over like where the beaming part of the heat of the day is. And then they also can't stay cold because how succulents protect themselves in the winter is during the day they absorb the heat. And that's what you see. You know, you see those really gorgeous stress colors, the pinks and the purples. You see those in the winter because that's the heat they're holding on to so they can get through the night. But when you're an albino, you don't have the same hormones to hold on to it. So with your valuable succulents that are variegated, keep them inside and just try not to give them full like 14 hours of sun too much hot because they're going to get more burnt. They're more apt to burn because they don't have the protection. But I do have my last show and tell, and then we'll see if anybody has any questions. So Japan Moon, Echeverry, Japan Moon River, is one of the coolest plants to me because this is all one plant. And so this is just kind of showing all the mutations you can have. I haven't cleaned it up since I leave the winter. It's been really cold at night, and I leave in the winter. I like to leave the leaves because it kind of protects them from getting overly cold. And
Right.
so they're still here. We're still getting kind of coldish nights. And that's why everything's still pink, because I live by the mountains. But so this is all one head. So you see here, this is kind of the non-variegated. This, you know, it's beautiful. It's got pinkishes to it, really cool leaves. But then this is the variegated head of it. So this one is just kind of known. This one's a full albino. And then these are just different layers. Like some have more green, more stripes. And then this one, which is pretty cool. Do you see how it's like half? I think I'll have to do it this way. It is coming in half like the normal color leaf, the pink.
Oh, yeah.
And so then you've got a crest of it. And yeah, so you can just see this is all from one stem. This is all one plant. I couldn't believe it when I saw Echeveria Japan Blue River, because they really are known for producing weird things. Because even you've got albino heads, sometimes the leaves can be curly, sometimes they can be flat. I do have some that do genuinely do the half and half.
Right. That's so
There you
cool.
go. So I do love the woody stems too. I think that real succulents, like they don't stay small and compact in nature and sit on the ground. They start growing up. You always, succulents are cannibals. They're constantly eating their leaves to grow. You can't do anything about it. And this is what they want to do, is to grow tall and weird. And I've just let this guy go crazy. And so you just never know what's going to pop up. But like, I do think that with variegated succulents, if you're truly trying to find a collector's piece, the nice thing about the tropicals, if you buy a cutting, it's got enough to grow roots. It is nice to buy succulents that have kind of like a family, so you can kind of help it grow more and you can keep it stable and things like that. But those are all the tips I have for today. Does anybody have any questions before, or do you have anything you want to add or wrap up or like show and tell?
Goodness, I love your variegated cacti. Cacti are super cool to me, and I love seeing other people's variegated succulents as well. That's a world I want to get more into. I mostly go for the blue hued cacti right now. But variegation is super cool. I love it. If you're ever thinking of buying something variegated, make sure to check and see, like if you're getting a variegated monstera, check the stem. Make sure that little growth point that's going to come out is in a nicely variegated section, because it's rare, even if it's a beautiful variegated leaf, if the stem is green, in my experience, you're not getting a variegated plant. Like it's going to be a beautiful one leaf, but the next is going to be green. So hopefully they've heavily discounted that, which I have done in the past. I've been like, okay, well, it's a beautiful variegated leaf, $20. Like, I know you're going to get a regular monstera out of this, so don't be expecting anything. But it's a really pretty leaf for now. I would also say that I do give my variegated monstera a good amount of airflow. I see a lot of people growing them in greenhouses and not giving it a ton of humidity, not much airflow. That's what's going to cause that browning. So like, I've never had browning on this plant before, but when I moved and kept it in a cardboard box and didn't give it much tough love, it did start to brown.
I have a good example of too much humidity, because I had my humidifier too close. And that's actually probably a good final tip, is that, like, especially with tropicals, I mean, succulents are a whole new game, that variegation, since that part is more delicate, it's not a hardy orange leaf. Let me grab this one right here. It got too close. The pole just hit the ceiling. It got too close to the humidifier, so I've moved it way back. And you would think too much humidity wouldn't hurt it, but they don't really like it. And so I was able to stop it, but you can see it just didn't like it because it was right on it. So my humidifier is actually on the other side of the room now, and they do want airflow in general is just really important. But I honestly didn't have any idea that because just this is so delicate that it doesn't want to be hit.
Right. So, I don't want to be super babied either. I like that you just have it living out in your like living room area, because I try to a ton of, because you want to replicate, you know, in nature what makes plants strong, and it's that tough love, that resistance, that airflow. You see some people when they get like fiddly figs shaking the trunk to make it more strong, because plants will adapt. As that's, you know, everyone says, how do you prevent browning? you just got to figure out what you're doing. What you're doing wrong is making it brown and fix it. But the plant, yeah, if the plant's not happy, it will brown off the variegated sections. Like it won't stop producing variegated sections, but it will brown them off and make it look not as pretty. That's for sure.
It's giving you a sign that you're giving it too much or not enough. And so, because they are just in general, variegated plants, cactus, succulents, they're harder to root. They're just more delicate. So just do your research and make sure as you purchase one, do some research some blogs and YouTubes to make sure you're doing the right thing.
Exactly. Other than that, I have a patient I need to see in 30 minutes. So let's wrap it up. I've loved coming and talking with you, Cam. This has been super fun. We'll definitely have to do this again because I don't normally do a lot of lives, but I do. This has been so fun, especially because I'm sure my friends and my husband are tired of me talking plants all the time around them. So it'll be makes much talking to another plant person about plants.
Plants. And let's be honest, why did we quit show and tell after fourth grade, like kindergarten? It was like the best part of life. So
Exactly.
I'm going to be here weekly. It was a blast talking with you. Thank you so much. If you guys have any questions or anything, just let us know. And I really appreciate you coming on today, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Cam. You as well.
Bye, my planties.
Bye, plant friends.